chicken nuggets at McDonald's are a weird, gross chicken slurry, but they are the best chicken. Like the nuggets at McDonald's are the best chicken nuggets out there. Wendy's is a close second.
I'm going to combat that and just throw out that Burger King salads are better than McDonald's salads. Fine. Okay.
I mean, why are you getting a salad at either of those places?
Yeah, but why are you eating the chicken McNuggets, right?
Because chicken nuggets are great.
Oh, come on. Let's be serious, right? It's for the burgers.
No, absolutely not. Wendy's does the spicy chicken sandwich. McDonald's does an okay spicy chicken sandwich. I don't know that I've ever had a chicken sandwich at Burger King. Burger King Whopper is better than a Quarter Pounder. Absolutely. A Quarter Pounder is a gross, greasy thing. A Whopper is great.
A Whopper is better than a Big Mac too, I would argue. So they're tied at this point in my mind. And the thing that tips it for Burger King is the Hershey pie.
I've never once thought to order that. If I want a dessert, I'm going to go to Dairy Queen. Why would you, again, it's like you're like, oh, I prefer to go to Target because Target usually has the deodorant I'm looking for. Okay. I mean, that's not usually why I'm going to Target though. I'm going to Burger King and Burger King's better at the what'd you call it? The Hershey pie. McDonald's is better at the soft serve. You're going to the wrong places for the good things, man.
Because you're standing the Hershey pie up by itself there, and it's not. It's how the Hershey pie tastes after the Whopper and the rest of the meal. The Hershey pie tips Burger King. Isabel thinks the French fries tip McDonald's over the edge.
Absolutely. The French fries at McDonald's are so much galactically better than anywhere else that it makes McDonald's the de facto winner.
But that's a different category. So burger to burger, Burger King wins. French fry to French fries, McDonald's wins. Sodas even out.
Absolutely not. McDonald's has a special magic thing that they do to the coldness of the thing. Yes, they absolutely do. There's an actual thing that McDonald's specifically does to the steel pipes that they run the water and the cola through. It's a special thing that McDonald's actually does. Their sodas are
Burger
absolutely
King
better than
we're going to do that, and they realize it's bad for you. So let's just say they're even, okay?
Sure.
So now we're down to the dessert. And the soft serve ice cream does not beat out the Hershey pie.
I get it. People go to McDonald's for a McFlurry and the soft serve and everything else. That's a weird reason. So no, dessert is a weird thing to include.
No, I don't think so. I think I just won this argument. Basically, go try the Hershey pie. You'll see what I mean.
Ugh, no, thank you. What's in a Hershey pie?
I don't actually know. I don't eat the whole thing. I just eat the I just eat the pudding there. I don't actually like the outer shell of it, but it is
Hershey pie, Burger King. Oh God, ugh. See, this is the other thing. Chocolate isn't accent flavored. It should never be the main flavor. Like, I don't need this much chocolate. This is too much.
Yeah, you have to try it.
Nah, I don't really. Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat from me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. We're also here to get deeper on the human element. I could go on for an eternity about the people and how they think about the process of building complex systems. And I can't think of two better people to do that than Kevin and I.
That's right, we're your nightly news dynamic duo today. This is going to be a recurring and random episode that we drop from time to time where we look at a few news items that have come out in the past few weeks. It's a grab bag episode. But first, a friendly reminder that we're always interested in hearing questions directly from you, our listeners, for our segment User Stories. If you've got a scenario you'd like help with, whether it's working with an engineering or product team member, trying to figure out how to solve an agile process problem, or you just can't understand why your favorite app updated everything and it's now terrible, we're here to talk it through with you. You can send those questions to acceptancepod@gmail.com or submit them on the Discord in the User Stories channel, and we might be able to help on a future episode. And we're happy to keep it anonymous so no one can trace it back to you if you end up talking a coworker or something.
Yeah, I can't wait till we get the episode where someone talks.
Right?
I also really would like to be a fly on the wall when people talk me.
See, this is the problem I have with the idea of telepathy, is I don't know that I always need to know. There's random little talking thoughts that flit through people's brains, but they're just processed and moved on. It doesn't mean I actually dislike the person. It's just, that's the 5% that's annoying me about you today, but it doesn't actually matter. And if you had telepathy, you'd be able to actually hear all of those, and I don't think it would be good for you.
Yeah, but I think as you get older, you get a little bit wiser. Like, I know the people people who like me and get frustrated with me and will talk me, but I'll say, but I know they like, right? I know
Sure.
in our moments we get along, and I can be a D, and I can be annoying. Like as I've got older, I realize that, right?
That is this podcast, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So I deserve to be shit talked about,
Sure.
and so I would listen to it and I'd be like, huh, that's funny. Yeah, I do that. And then yeah, obviously there'll be people that I know who I'm not close with, and they'll talk to me, and that'll be different. Where it's like, well, yeah, I'm not going to hang out with that person. But I think it's really important to know that.
Yeah, I do. I think we've talked about this on past episodes. My number one thing to any team who works for me is tell me when you disagree. I don't want to find out about it because you told someone else and they told me. Just come tell me the thing you think is not working right, that I'm doing wrong or that someone else is doing wrong, and we can all figure it out. But yeah, if I hear about it because it got back to me, that's much worse than you just telling me this is the thing I wish you did better. But before we get to all of that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We don't have a cringe little segment name for this. We're just going to talk about a few news stories that came out recently and see where the conversation takes us. So we do have an update on the UK post office scandal. There's apparently even older software called Capture, which was before. So in the UK post office scandal, the software Horizon built by Fujitsu had all of the problems that sent people to jail, and the financial recording was so corrupt and buggy that the central system thought people were stealing, and actually it was just a bug, or a series of bugs, because it was bad software. Turns out there was even earlier software called Capture, and that was like desktop software that you had to install on probably floppy disks or something. And it's in the early 90s when this was going on, and that was also having financial reporting. And so there's examples of like a guy in the early 90s used to manually do all of his bookkeeping with pen and paper, and as soon as he switched to this Capture system, he was suddenly £80,000 under reporting money and trying to cover it with his own money. It's the weirdest thing where like in every situation here, the sub postmaster is like, oh, I guess I screwed up, and so I will just shell out 10-20,000 pounds of my own money rather than go and be like, my first reaction to be like, there's clearly a bug. Someone go and like, where do I file the ticket? And it's crazy that maybe they did and they didn't get any support, but we now have two pieces of software from the last like 30 years that's misrepresenting financial information and causing all of this heartache and problems. It's time to just delete that post office and start from scratch. I don't know.
Maybe that's today, many years, decades for us of working in technology. A bug is second nature, right? Like we just get it.
Sure.
We understand how they get introduced. We had to talk about the cost of them. But back in this is like 92, right?
Right.
Did anybody really, if you're a postmaster in 92, is the first thing on your mind like bug? It's probably not, right? Because you're looking at this magic and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, this is magic, right? Like they're giving me this magic software. And that's even more perplexing then, because they must have been thinking to themselves, well, I know I'm not wrong. So am I actually, is the post office like stealing from me? It's tragic that these people, and it's actually a fairly similar story. And that reminds me of NASA. NASA went through amazing internal review after the Challenger disaster.
Right.
And then obviously Columbia, I think, is a little less controversial because, the tile's a little bit different than the O-rings. But you would think the post office, after going through this in 1992, would then realize during Horizon, wait a minute, is this like 1992? And then that begs the question, is it even the same generation of engineers and executives in the post office? It's a completely different generation of people, right?
And it's a different vendor, so it's Unisys is the vendor that provides this software. It's not Fujitsu. So yeah, who knows what weird levels of bureaucracy and things are obscuring this. And clearly there's a culture in this post office of just mistrust of these sub postmasters. So they're just assuming absolutely this is fraud, like never once having the thought to question the software itself. And you're right, in 1992, I mean, that's why even one of the Horizon bugs in the late 90s, you had that like 70-year-old postmaster who just kept hitting enter because he was like, oh, the software's just, broken, and just kept hitting enter over and over again. And the bug was secretly deleting or overwriting transactions or whatever. So yeah, your technical skill on your users is already not great, much less in 1992. Like that's pre-Windows 95. Who knows what kind of DOS, Windows 3.1 for work groups, terrible desktop software they're using at the time. Maybe it's a Mac. Everything's wrong with a Mac.
And the postmaster in the case that you're bringing up in the 90s, I think he does have a quote, and he said every time he had a loss, he did think it was himself. I thought it must be me,
right?
That I had made the mistake, even though I hadn't for 20 years. years. So it's almost like painful in every area, right? It's painful for them because there's the fiscal liability, but it's also this person who's 20 years, probably there's a sense of pride back in that generation too. Like I run a great post office in a little village somewhere in Lancashire. Bury's not a big place, right?
Right.
Now all of a sudden I'm really bad at my job, but thinking to himself, well, I have to have this software because if I don't, my post office is going to close. It's just like, it's cruel on so many levels. It's like the Hershey pie, but sorry.
If you think of the emotional impact of your grandfather type figure who just thinks he's not good at computers, and so now he's like, well, I'm not good at computers, I'm the one clearly screwing up. That's heartbreaking and sad when it's clearly a bug. And also, it goes back to the conversation we were having a couple weeks ago about AI taking over and human trust in technology. The reason that Air France plane crashed is because they just assumed the autopilot was working correctly. Of course, the guy was like, well, I'm not this computers are the next future thing. They're infallible. Of course, I'm the one screwing up. Our trust in these things that are unknown to us is going to cause this.
Yeah, and it's prevalent now, right? Like this is the problem with deepfakes too. People believe what they see. People go on the
Right?
internet and they're like, "Well, that happened. I saw Biden do it." Right? Like
Right.
this is real,
Yep.
and it's tragic. Like the more you read into this, the postmaster in question, he covered the losses with his own money.
Yeah.
Right? Eventually,
80,000 pounds in 1992, which is an insane amount of money now.
and not only that, but like he had to leverage the bravery awards of him stopping armed robbers. Now you're leveraging that against your prison time.
Right.
And not to mention like the emotional turmoil he goes through, like sitting with your family and saying, "I didn't do anything wrong. Like maybe I made mistakes." And yeah, it's cruel on so many levels.
And he's fortunate to be an old white guy who has those bravery citations to put in front of the judge. A good chunk of these sub postmasters are not white guys, and the amount that the justice system is not going to give them any favors, and they don't have the bravery awards, so they don't get a 12-month probation. They instead get 4 years in jail. That system was already not going to be favorable. Next up is the US House passed the TikTok ban.
I am so confused by this. So I'm not a big TikTok user.
Sure.
I have an account and I go on there occasionally, and I'm annoyed with it. I can make it 10 minutes in TikTok. What is going on? What is going on with TikTok?
So there's a combination of a couple of things. There are possibly, I won't say legitimate, but there is a question, which is this Chinese government-backed company that offers TikTok. And TikTok is a thing which the TikTok algorithm is legitimately terrifying at how good and accurate it is at showing things to you that are relevant to your interest based on what it observes you doing. I don't quite understand why, like the whole theory of this is allegedly, this is the problem, there's so many multiple motives overlapping here, and some of these motives get a little bit conspiracy theory-ish, which I'm going to do because it's Republicans are involved. But in theory, there's an argument that foreign, adversary is a strong word for some people of what China's relationship with the U.S. is, but this foreign government having a thing on, half of Americans' devices, able to understand their behavior and do a bunch of stuff. I guess there's the House ban is a, foreign security ban. It is trying to say this Chinese company is too close to what we're doing. And I'm like, yeah, but so is Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon. Everyone has that tracking. Alexa is listening to this conversation right now. Just because it's China, what is China possibly going to do with the information about what some 22-year-old influencer, I don't know. And there's discussions about, well, they could exert influence. And I think this gets to the real issue, which is if I put my slightly conspiracy hat on and I look at the number of things on TikTok that are very much mobilizing young people to think about things, and there have been situations where Republicans have posted, here's a form that you can submit on a website to tell us how you hate trans people. And a bunch of youth on TikTok are like, no, that. We're going to go flood it and ruin the website's ability to take in any information. TikTok has mobilized political action and has mobilized political action currently around the Israel-Gaza conflict. And I think there's probably a number of people who don't love that kind of mobilization. And the reason I think they haven't helped themselves argue that it's purely just a foreign influences. As soon as the House ban was passed, Steve Mnuchin, the former Trump Treasury Secretary, was like, oh, yep, I've got some people I'm putting together so we can buy TikTok. And it's like, yeah, just like Elon wanted to buy Twitter because he hated the discourse on Twitter that was all against him. Of course, people want to buy TikTok and be able to have better control over the discourse that's happening. And it's like, okay, so we're trading Chinese. China hasn't censored a bunch as far as I can tell, but I don't know. It's weird. It gets messy really quickly.
It just seems so odd. It's such a weird soup, this country at the moment as it relates to foreign affairs, because we have a lot of Chinese investment in property, land, businesses.
Right.
But TikTok is the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Right. And somehow TikTok is the straw, but not Facebook, not all of the stuff that Amazon knows, all of the stuff that Google knows, all of the stuff that Microsoft knows. Like, if your concern is understanding data, privacy, security, not wanting to have political influence coming from these apps, apparently we're okay with Jeff Bezos having political influence, but not the Chinese government, which
Yeah.
I guess there's an argument there, maybe, but I don't know that China isn't Russia. Russia's the one trying to mess with us every single day. I don't know that China's been doing a ton to yeah, it's weird. I don't.
But it's also ignoring, like, I'm sorry, but as an outsider observing American politics over the last 20 years, I'd say the greater threat is internal anyway.
Right.
That I'd be hard pressed to think of what the Chinese could say that the two parties are not saying over here that could be any worse, right? Like, I mean, January 6th, we
Right.
are still talking about that. And yeah, so it's an odd one for me. And there's got to be some ulterior motives. Maybe we're not seeing that financial
Right.
control, seizing power, because I cannot buy that the Chinese influence is going to influence an election. It's like,
Not the way Russia tried. Russia actively tried and succeeded
Yeah.
in a way that I don't think we have any evidence for. And there was a Republican senator who got security intel briefing that some other Republican senator had asked for to like have the CIA and everybody else, the NSA and everybody tell the Senate, what's the current state of TikTok as a national security threat. And that senator came out and was like, I can't tell you anything. Obviously, we were in the skiff. I'm not allowed to divulge, but that was nothing. That was stupid. That was a waste of my time. So I'm not actually convinced that there's anything there. It seems like it might be relatively dead in the Senate because the House is full of just reactionary, xenophobic nut jobs in a way that the Senate technically is, but also kind of isn't. I don't know. It's weird. Also, by the way, the irony of the Americans who have spent the last 60 years meddling in other countries' affairs and toppling socialist democracies to install dictators. And like right now, I think is it Guatemala or Nicaragua? There's like some Kevin from the future just popping in to say it was Honduras. All right, back to the episode. They ousted their dictators and they've elected a fairly left-wing government, and now a bunch of Bitcoin tech bros are trying to sue the country to say, no, the crap that the American dictator allowed us to do, you need to continue doing. And the socialist left-wing government that just got elected is like, no, that's not how it's going to work. So America being frustrated that someone else is meddling in their affairs is a little ironic.
Yeah, and that's why I wonder if there's something else going on, because it's interesting that two parties who've never been more divided both seem fairly consistent on this one. And you brought it up, Russia. I mean, we know there was interference from Russia, which felt almost encouraged by one side, right? Which is because there's no denial, there's no sort of, hey, we'd love to keep them out of our election. But in this case, like, I can't believe that I can't believe it's seen as such a threat without them not telling us something. So there could be something they're not telling us. But it's interesting from a sci-fi genre writing perspective, which is, this is how we ended up taking over a country. We got on TikTok and got people dancing and pouring cold water over each other.
Right.
And then we pushed our agenda and everybody woke up one day and was just suddenly brainwashed into saying, hail the almighty leaders from overseas. Like,
right.
I just does not seem plausible.
And if I do definitely, like, I feel like there's a part of it, which is TikTok is absolutely full of, and there's plenty of conservative people on TikTok talking all of their stuff.
Yeah.
But there is an entire youth part of TikTok, and that's seeping up through Gen Z and into to millennials even, which is very much reactionary. And even, Democrats like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and others who are currently in the leadership position are definitely looking at it being like, they're trying to push me to positions that technically I agree with, but don't think are electorally winning arguments, or maybe they do disagree with some of these positions. But the radicalization of the youth in this country on TikTok towards a bunch of positions has nothing to do with China somehow exerting influence. It has to do with the current hellscape of jobs and education and student loan debt and the economy and housing markets, and boomers were able to do things for $90,000 in the 70s that you cannot possibly do for less than $1 million today. Like, there's a bunch of structural reasons to our society and economy and culture that are radicalizing basically millennials down. And it's not the Chinese. I'm sorry. It's not you trying to kick TikTok out of the country because you think that's somehow the cause of it. No. The reason they're radicalized on TikTok has nothing to do with the Chinese.
Well, listen, I have a daughter now, and I imagined at some point I would have to go on TikTok with my daughter and do the father-daughter dance.
Yep.
She would teach me how to do some dubstep
Yep.
or something.
Yep.
And now that's under threat, and I'm just not okay with that. Where am I going to do that? And I'm not going to do that on Facebook.
You were going to get indoctrinated into some secret Chinese dance that rewrote your brain chemistry and made you a socialist. So, I don't know, you just saved yourself some real heartache.
I might already be halfway there. If I had to put my money, if this was a game of Risk right now, I think I might put my money. I might already have a lot of my chips on their side. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It seems it's a weird thing. It's the one time I'm kind of rooting for the badness and the horrible structure of the Senate to actually kind of save us from something stupid, because it doesn't look like it's got it. The chances in the Senate seem pretty small right now.
Yeah, and even if it becomes law, right? Like constitutionally, they have to prove because
they'll sue immediately. They'll immediately sue, and the ban won't go into effect until this Supreme Court is bought and paid for by the people who want to buy TikTok. So I'm not actually sure the Supreme Court doesn't let it go through, but sure.
Yeah, this one just feels like a constitutional argument at some point where people push back and say, I want my father-daughter dance on TikTok, right? And unless you have a bloody good reason for taking it away, like, you can't do that.
The Supreme Court hasn't actually paid attention to the Constitution since Bush v. Gore. It is fully Calvin ball. They make up the rules that they want to support their position. There is don't hope for the Constitution to save you on this one.
There's gonna be a drone flying over your place one day. You better watch out.
I know. Speaking of drones, malfunctioning robot in a human suit, Elon Musk has had a few bad weeks in court. He tried to sue OpenAI, saying that OpenAI was moving away from their original nonprofit mission by trying to charge people to use OpenAI. And I'm sure that had nothing to do with the fact that Twitter has Grok, their OpenAI competitor. I'm sure he definitely had the best of intentions with OpenAI. And as a result, the OpenAI board released all of his emails from a couple of years ago, agreeing with OpenAI that the infrastructure costs to run OpenAI would be too high and no amount of investment would be able to account for that, and that OpenAI absolutely had to start looking for revenue sources and charging people to use it. So Elon turning around now and being like, well, my recommendation that you find revenue sources is bad actually, and I'm going to sue you for finding revenue sources? No, man, you don't get to do that. Allegedly, Elon claims that he'll be open sourcing Grok, and so the argument that he's suing OpenAI to be, anti-competitive for his own solution loses a little bit of weight. But Elon claims a lot of things and then they never actually happen. He had to pay $40 million in fines to the SEC because he lied about a thing to try and juice Tesla stock. So I'll believe it when I see it, but it's a weird mix of why are you doing this, man? Why are you suing OpenAI? Why are you claiming you're going to open source Grok, your own OpenAI competitor? Like, it gets messy and weird because Elon is messy and weird.
Yeah, and you know me, I love or I'm annoyed by Musk. I think we're starting to see a lot more public tantrums, right? And it does feel like tantrums to some extent. Like,
right.
You can't find a lot of rationale. Like, if you look at the arguments against OpenAI, if you track it through the history, it doesn't have a leg to stand on, right?
No.
Which leaves you thinking it's a lot of it's public tantrum, and actually in the current climate, that hasn't been a terrible tactic. It sort of falls when you get to court, hopefully, and you start to go in front of judicial bodies. But for people, and stock prices and your legacy and your legendary status, he's kind of been fueled by some of that. Like his followers love him for that, what they would regard honesty.
Right, and the media gobbles it up. So Elon tweets out, "Oh, the Neuralink transfer was successful," and the AP, the freaking Associated Press, doesn't say, "Sure, show us, let us meet the patient, let us verify this." The AP just breathlessly repeats, "Oh, Neuralink is a success." Elon tweets out, "The Neuralink guy is controlling a mouse with his brain." No one knows that that's true. That we're taking Elon's word. Known liar, $40 million fine from the SEC. Liar Elon Musk, just telling you that, and a bunch of media institutions are like, "Look at how great Neuralink is." No, it's not. You have no idea if that's true. So the environment doesn't support actually holding people accountable for the things that they say. We just report the headline. We report that Trump thinks a certain thing. That thing is not reality. The thing he thinks isn't actually true, but the headline he gets is horrible situation. It's like, the situation isn't actually horrible. We can't just repeat what people like this say, but the media hasn't learned that. The other thing is, Elon's facing lawsuits from music publishers. So music publishers are suing Twitter, now X, because apparently they have evidence that blue checks, the verified users who are paying Elon, get more lenient treatment when they do copyright infringement. And so if you're a normal user, you immediately get your content flagged as violating copyright. But if you're paying Elon, allegedly it looks like Elon's sort of just saying, "Oh, you can kind of get away with the copyright infringement." And the music companies are pushing back on him and saying, "You got to stop it no matter what." Now, I personally think music copyright is a tricky balancing act. If someone's using it on Twitter, am I really replacing the 30-second clip in the tweet from actually streaming or paying for the music? I think copyright infringement gets a little bit weird in some of these social networks, but anything that tries to hold Elon accountable for his crappy decisions, trying to get his blue check army some special treatments, I'm all in favor for punishing him on that. So I don't know. I'm not going to take the music publisher's side on this one, but I do enjoy watching Elon squirm.
Yeah, I think copyright is going to need. I think we're going to need to take a long, hard look at copyright in the next few years. I'm probably a little bit more out there, and yeah, I think it needs to change. I think once you put some of your work on the airwaves, and a lot of these people are making money already. Yeah, if I use it on Twitter, if I use it on Twitch, or I put it in my background music on YouTube, I'm sorry, you're really going to come after me and make me take my video down because it's watched by 40 subscribers because I use your music as a backing for my video game. It is so petty. You put your music out there, you know.
The problem is, most of the time, the people who benefit from, so the corporation who owns that gets most of the money from all of that, and there are plenty of small artists who don't get a lot of publicity, don't get a lot of exposure, and not everyone's Beyonce, and the number of Beyoncés and Taylor Swifts has decreased over the last 20 years, so the percentage of money going to the big music publishers and the number of wildly successful artists has gone down.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get rid of copyright enforcement in ways that are designed to protect people. So for example, there's an article out of, where was it? So Under Armour got in trouble for claiming that AI made a commercial, and then it turns out that actually most of the commercial was just AI putting like a filter on top of a bunch of existing work that an agency had done for Under Armour a couple of years ago. And because AI churns through and has no source attribution, there was no way to credit the original people, except when you watch the video, it was very clearly this previous ad that had previously been filmed with like a weird blue filter on it. And so I think there's a bunch of these cases where it's one thing where I'm not worried about Sony Music, BMG or whatever it's called, making an extra $10,000, but I do worry about the people who already got screwed by their music label. They already got screwed by possibly entering into a brand relationship with Under Armour, and Under Armour got to take advantage of, well, we paid you the $10,000 in 2020 to film this thing for us, and we get to use it in perpetuity. There's a reason that Hollywood has residuals, and if you're going to benefit financially from my work for the next 10 years, I should get some cut of that. But that's a negotiated thing.
Yeah.
I'm worried about I'm not worried about Beyonce. Beyonce doesn't get materially harmed by a tweet that embeds 30 seconds of her content, but the other 10,000 artists and musicians out there who don't have that success and don't have that fame and that backing, they do get harmed.
Yeah, they get harmed, but Kevin, you and some other wholesome people care about them, but these lawsuits are not about them, right? These lawsuits are about Mariah Carey's music getting used. Like these,
right?
This.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not actually taking taking the side of the music publishers in this one, because I do think
Yeah.
that they are suing for their benefit, not for the overall benefit. But the side effect is an overall benefit. And so I am
Yeah.
quasi on their side.
I will say I don't like the idea that the verified users are somehow protected and I'm not. Right? That bothers me.
Oh, that's absolutely the even stupider part of this. Is it's not like he's fully dismantled Twitter over the past couple of, like, the past year by firing a bunch of people, and the app is slowly breaking down, and copyright verification is one of those things. But the fact that you can prove allegedly that it's just the blue checks is just even more. It's a weird, like, the blue check thing in general is bad and dumb because we need actual verification. There's nothing fancy about getting a blue check. Finding ways to have people pay you is fine. I think the Twitter has always suffered from how do you monetize the thing. So if he's found people who are willing to do that, that's fine. But yeah, giving them special treatment to break, not the law, but to break your agreements is stupid and crappy. What else are you doing? Are they getting better performance? Maybe there's an argument there because they're paying him, but, like, I don't know. It's a weird thing. He's created this special club for the worst type of people.
Yeah, I mean, it does show that there was a conscious decision, right?
Right.
They knew what they were doing was wrong, and the minute they do that, then they're open to being liable too, right? So yeah, it's a weird situation, but I don't know. Some of these, the word is brazen, right?
Right.
He is brazen.
Right.
And there's a lot of other leaders who are brazen, whether it's business or politics these days. And, you know me, I'm not super political, but there are people who've pushed the very limits and actually exposed and made a mockery of what we consider to be the greatest democracy in the world and the greatest legal system in the world. And we're now starting to see evidence of, actually, it's not enforceable in certain areas. Like, we've known for years there are different classes of people who get treated differently and punished differently than us. But there are people who are so brazen in their mockery of the system today. I just wonder how long before the system has to accept change, or you have to enforce it, right?
Well, that's the thing, is the under prosecution of white collar crime has been a thing for forever. The brazen way in which the rich are allowed to do things that the poor can't, and they get a $10,000 fine, which is a 45-minute rounding error for them, in a way that a poor person gets sent to jail. Like, the system has always been stacked against these situations. The problem is, you're right, it's gotten brazen. Something broke. Shame was, like, somehow erased from the public consciousness, and now you're able to just openly talk about the things that, like, in the 90s, all of this was happening in the 90s and the 80s, but people were, I won't say smart enough because it's crappy either way, but, like, they were at least, we shouldn't talk about this in the open. We shouldn't make it clear that that's what we're doing. We should lie to a bunch of people and tell them the American dream is for everyone. No, the American dream was for the rich, and, every single day, thanks to Reagan, things got worse for people because it was more important. The American dream was real post-World War II and was slowly degraded over the past 60 years, but they at least kept it quiet in their own self-interest. I think you're right. Now that it's in the open, that brazenness, and I don't know if that was facilitated through the internet and social media making everything more public. A bunch of bad stuff used to happen all the time. We didn't just all have cameras in our pockets to record all of it. I just wonder that there's, like, this accumulation of the internet and social media making things more public, and therefore the powerful and rich are like, well, crap, it's out there, but I haven't faced any consequences for it being out there. Maybe I can now just talk about my blatant corruption out in the open. And maybe that's actually good. Maybe that's gonna force the change, because now that the masses can see that it's going on, does that force a change?
There's a couple of thoughts here. One is the three words that you'll hear me say over and over, right? The normalization of deviance.
Yep.
People who know me know, like, I'm not a big fan of humanity, right? I think our time here is done. Time for, like, the dinosaurs. Number two, I do think you raised a good point about the internet and the exposure and what used to be shameful that would lead somebody to live in the corner house and be like, who lives there? Be like, oh, you remember in the 50s there was that person who did all that fraud and had a pyramid scheme, but, well, they live there, but nobody ever sees them, right? That's not the case anymore. And I think what's very clever, that what a lot of these characters, certainly in Musk's case, is he's attached himself to a side of the political arm, which immediately offers him support and cover. So it's an interesting game.
Which is not a thing that would have happened 20 years ago, because 20 years ago, the
Yeah.
political sides were not as my team, your team. And
Yeah.
now, if they're on your team, you can look at some ridiculously bad things that they're doing, and you're like, yeah, but my instinct now is just to simply defend my team.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it gives you cover for a bunch of
Yeah.
things.
So the normalization of deviance, and this is why when I was talking to one of the editors at one of the major newspapers a couple of years ago, and he said, "You seem very pessimistic." And I said, "I don't believe we will fix these problems in my generation or my. I think we may begin to see some evidence of fixing it in my kids' lifetime in America, but I genuinely think we're so polarized, not just at the political level, at the business level. And I hope we start to see these characters. I hope we reap the benefits of their brilliance, but they're low in moral fiber, right?
Right.
The normalization of their deviance needs to come to an end, right? We need to return back to the old values, I think.
I think the problem I have is there never were old values. So that's the thing where I think we disagree is I don't see any evidence of old values. The old value was don't talk about it publicly. We're allowed to get away with it, but we just don't we have the shame to know the thing we're doing is bad, so we don't embrace it publicly and we convince the public that actually the reason this is happening is because of, these foreigners, because of the communists, because of all of these like there's always a scapegoat that they've had that they can point to, and now they still have the scapegoat, but they also just get to talk about it brazenly out in public. And I don't want that. I don't want the answer. The answer can't be re-find your shame and still continue to do all of this stuff in secret. The answer has to be stop the bad actions themselves.
If this was a sprint and I was doing the retrospective, I would still want to go back to what you described as not having the time when we didn't have old values. I would still go back to that iteration of our agile and start again from there. Even with it swept under the rugs and being quiet, because the alternative is now it's in the open. These people are making a mockery of the judicial system.
Right.
It reminds me of when I used to park in Boston, and I realized it's actually cheaper to get the parking ticket than it is to find a garage, right? And people genuinely had that attitude where it's like, well, I'll just pay the fine, right? These people now are just at the point where, and we saw it again today, a famous soccer player in Spain was recently charged with rape and sentenced, and so for years, just released on €1 million bail today. And we've just got to the point where if you can post €1 million bail, you're out after serving 25% of your sentence,
right?
And you're still on probation, but you've got €1 million. Like, how do we come to that? How do we come to the judicial system is now a business?
I'm not convinced it wasn't always. We're just more aware of it now. So that's the thing.
The aware is the danger, though, because the aware clashes with the political awareness, and now you can't hold these guys accountable. In society, we can't hold these guys accountable, because if we knew less about these people and it was just hey, by the way, Elon Musk, look at the names in history. Ponzi. Will a Ponzi scheme, will that guy be remembered for anything other than his dirty game, right? He won't. These guys would have been remembered as the dirty guys, but now they won't be, because they've now been able to publicly have it all out in the open. There's no shame, and they've been able to attach themselves to one side of the polarized political system, and these guys will continue, and they'll be empowered to continue. I'd rather go back to the old days, whether there was a value system or not. I'd still rather go back and see if we could fix that. We won't, obviously we can't, but these guys will keep getting away with this for years and years.
See, and this is where I think they were getting away with it anyways. Ponzi and Madoff were the two examples that we made of people 80 years apart. It was happening during those 80 years, and we weren't making examples of people because every once in a while you have to throw the masses a sacrificial lamb. And now we at least are aware of all of the other things that are going on, and that awareness is hopefully the thing that enables the change. I don't think without the awareness, people are going to want to change anything.
Oh, you're so optimistic. No, I don't think so, because for every optimistic person who wants change, there's somebody looking and saying, well, I can be deviant too. Like, the way you get ahead is to be deviant. There's so many people who look at these guys and say, yeah, they're brilliant, yeah, they're successful, but the one thing they've got that everybody else doesn't have is they're deviant. And I worry. I think you might be too optimistic that these people aren't also creating a generation of deviant people. Who go on to do great things in business and be deviant too.
Ironically, I'm arguing for the sting. and you're arguing for trying to avoid the sting in this situation. I'm arguing for the public nature of this hopefully does spur more public outrage, even if you're right, the answer is for the next 20 years, people get even more brazen, and that is a snowball effect in which now in the public, the snowball is rolling downhill. And yeah, it's bad that there's an entire generation of people who saw that brazenness and thought, oh, I can do that too, and the snowball gets bigger, but at least the snowball is out in public, whereas previously, when it wasn't public, it was just a slow trickle of constant snow down the side of the hill. This metaphor is falling apart, but I am arguing for the sting and the gap in this situation in a way that you aren't. It's just an interesting reversal.
But this is not a sting in my mind. I can't think of a bodily function that some people, that 50% of the people enjoy and 50% of the people find uncomfortable. But the problem, like the sting to me, is there's a cascading problem in society where there's enough people lose their jobs. For example, when we talk about AI, there's enough people lose their jobs and the country falls apart because they can't afford it, right? You've got people who are genuinely starving and homeless and they've got nowhere to go.
I'm saying as a metaphor. I'm not saying the actual sting.
No, I know. But in this case, only half the country considers this a sting. That's the problem with this being out in the open is, depending on which political party you talk to, Musk is either a genius or the devil. And the side that believes he's a genius do not believe this is a sting. They actually think this guy is up there with the second coming. That's my problem with these guys. There is no sting.
Well, that's fair. The problem also, though, is there's like 47% of the country which doesn't vote. Even more of them don't consider themselves, even though they do vote, they don't consider themselves strong partisans. The actual strong partisans on each side are like 20% of the country. So I don't think it's 50-50. It's 50-50 of the active, engaged people. And my version of this is that the corruption gets so bad that the inactive other half see it and respond to it. And there's no evidence that that's ever happened before. Those people stay terminally disengaged, but every once in a while it does. So I'm not sure. I'm not saying I'm right, but I do think that there is a greater chance of sunlight being a disinfectant in this case than letting it go back to being quiet. And also, as you always say on the AI discussion, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. There is no going backwards. So I don't think the idea that we're going to reintroduce shame to these people is a likely good strategy.
No, and that's why I say the weird thing for this one is, I hate to say it, it won't get fixed in my generation. And so, not that I'm saying I don't want to contribute to the fix, but there's I feel fairly powerless at this stage with some of these conversations. There's just nothing we can do in our generation. I firmly believe that we will see more characters like this, but yeah, I think it's going to be decades before we potentially try right things.
The underlying current of this entire podcast for however many more years we keep doing this, I feel like is going to be me trying to convince you that we have to at least try, and we have to at least try to take actions that can do that, so it's not decades. And we'll see how successful I am a couple of years from now.
Yeah, you may swing me. I had a moment a few weeks ago where I thought I changed one of my opinions. I did start to see some optimistic ends to the AI, and then initially it sort of felt there, and now it's gone again. Where I'm like, no, that's not accurate at all.
Sure. Next up is LinkedIn is going to get into the gaming world. So supposedly based on, I don't know what the full basis of the article was. I think people were poking around in LinkedIn code, or maybe LinkedIn talked about it in a little bit. Like I think actually LinkedIn like showed some screenshots, right? So
yeah, there's some media leaks of the games that they're potentially going to be offering, and
which is wild.
I don't think it's a bad thing. We're not on the same side on this one.
The way it's pitched in this article, which is, what is it? It's a TechCrunch article. The TechCrunch article that talks about it is basing it on the idea that like Wordle is popular, and so people want to play games. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. And I guess that there's business people who, I don't know that they even tend to do that, but people who have jobs also play. Like the tenuous link between why LinkedIn thinks they could create a Wordle competitor or something. And like we've been down this road. Facebook was wildly successful for many, many years with Farmville and other type of gaming capabilities, and that's died off because because it wasn't sustainable, and that's like sometimes those things go in fads and phases. Gamification and some of the stuff we've talked about with Mare on the HR episode, all of that seems to make sense. Wordle and a crossword competitor don't make sense to me.
I disagree.
Okay.
And here's why. And this is going to seem a bit off the rails, but I do think the tribal nature of the gamified, done correctly, the tribal nature of a good gamification system could be successful. I look at people like my significant other who does her daily mental exercises via her mobile device. And I think that she would also enjoy knowing that in the division table every day, she's contributing to her team being top of the table. We do tend to become tribal. Here's where I equate it. I've seen a lot of companies do a good job of like building squads within their development organizations and then encouraging personas and making it competitive. Like, hey, we're Gryffindor and they're Slytherin, and doing intra-department gamification, and they go off and do their team building exercises as a group. And I think this is a similar thing. I actually think the current mood of society, I think we're in the right place for tribal gamification. I actually pitched this idea several years ago to another technologist and said, hey, we had a little bit of a different slant on it, which was more around the interview process, which was I want to be able to create a series of games during the interview process, and I want to see the analytics. Like, these games have been specifically designed to match some of our engineering challenges, right? And you get some out of the box and you could build some custom. And I want to see the analytics of how my interviewees do with these games, right? So I can see how this could work, and I could see a lot of application. And I think the tribal nature of it, I think it's pretty cool. Like, if I can compete against a rival tech group across town and we're winning, I actually think it's a pretty good social experiment.
You've done way more product management work in the last 2 minutes than is evident in the article or in the way LinkedIn has talked about this.
Because it was my idea 2 or 3 years ago. Like,
but that's what I'm saying.
As soon as I read it, yeah, I understood exactly what they were going for.
But there's no evidence that that's what they're going for.
No, I know. But if they're listening, then they're just going to pay me $1 million
Sure.
for my ideas, because I introduced a mutual friend of ours, said, hey, you were right. And I was like, what? And he's like, go to Facebook. They introduced what you said they should.
Sure.
Just some of these things feel natural to me, but I think it's a sweet spot, right? Like, I thought about it 3 years too early. These guys are doing it at the right time, where I'm like, actually, the time is now. That's the perfect platform. And if they build it the right way, I actually think they could hit the market that I was originally thinking would enjoy this type of thing. So yeah, I've been thinking about this one a lot.
Sure, but again, I feel like you are putting your ideas on a company that has shown no evidence that that's what they're doing, and it's puzzling to me why maybe LinkedIn got caught out and something leaked, and so they had to be able to talk about it, or maybe this is just TechCrunch hypothesizing off of some very limited information. But if I was the product person at LinkedIn and I had this whole amazing idea of how I could do better, like why would LinkedIn do this? It's for better engagement on their app and to engage people in doing things. And so if that was my vision, why on earth did I allow it to be pitched as video games are pretty neat and new and the New York Times bought Wordle? Why are you introducing this to the world in such a stupid way? Who looks at this and thinks this is a good idea without all the added context that you've painted onto it that is not present in that article?
No, it's fine. But what happens when Google comes in 2 years and pays LinkedIn for the analytical data of all the people doing those puzzles, and they're like, hey, give us the profile of a product manager from the analytical data in the games? That's going to be worth some money, right?
Sure. Has LinkedIn explained that they're trying to monetize your gaming ability? Like, that's bad for the consumer to...
Maybe I'm making a leap, but I got to assume that LinkedIn is the perfect place to do this, because it's a great way for them to resell that data and say, and they do it today, right? They say, hey, you meet 8 of the 10 criteria for this job.
Sure.
I actually think this will go into a more complex DNA of like, hey, we've selected, they flipped it a little bit here, right? They could actually say to companies, hey, we picked 150 people out of the gamification data that actually suit this. And I get it. They're not saying they're going to do that, but I got to assume that somebody's thinking about that.
Sure. And then once that information goes public, it dies because even tech bros sometimes don't necessarily want that to happen without their consent and without them getting any benefit from it. So I don't know. It seems like a weird strategy to me. Your gamification route seems more interesting, and even that, I'm not sure it actually takes off. I don't know. This might be just a leak that LinkedIn wasn't planning on going public with anytime soon, but it feels like a very weird rollout of an incomplete idea. And if they go down that Google route, if they go down the your gamification route, maybe there's ways to do that, but it's a weird one to start with.
Equate it to this. It's fantasy football for nerds. And I believe this for years. I used to joke back in 2003, I'd say, you know what, one day engineers will be famous like baseballers, and you'll be able to have a little baseball card of Kevin Euland's rookie year. And it was a joke, but this is...
Your idea is that, not what LinkedIn has already been forced to talk about in this TechCrunch article. So we can hypothesize what we wish companies were doing, but that's that's not what the article is.
Nerds need to be cool, and we need a place to challenge each other. I love this.
You love what you think it is going to possibly be.
I won't use it, but I
no,
love
of course, right?
Because I'm not. I'm not. It's not my thing. It's not my type of games, right? But there's so many people like my significant other who do their daily mentals, and if they could do it here, and then the incentives start to kick in, I can see that being successful. Good on them.
Right.
Good on you, LinkedIn. Big fan of LinkedIn.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. If you liked what you heard, maybe go and drop 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and leave us a nice review. And if you didn't like what you heard, remember the name of the podcast is Triple Click. And also tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check it out. Some of the best podcasts out there grow by word of mouth, and we'd much appreciate it. To read articles that we've written on similar topics to the one we talk about here, head over to the blog at acceptancepod.com. You can also follow us on most apps. We're at AcceptancePod. We'll post links to show notes and any articles from the blog over there. We're also building a community on Reddit at r/acceptancecriteria and on Discord. You can find links to both in the show notes and on the blog. And I promise we'll be moderating the crap out of them to keep it a nice little slice of the internet. For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and you can find me on most apps at KThomasEuland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Tech Bro. And you can find me on most apps at Criteria Greeter. That's GREINER. And this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.